In other words, we went off course. And this is not my assessment alone. It was an assessment that was shared by the American people who nominated candidates for president from both major parties who despite our many differences, called for a new approach, one that rejected torture and one that recognized the imperative of closing the prison at Guantanamo Bay. Now let me be clear, we are indeed at war with Al-Qaeda and its affiliates. We do need to update our institutions to deal with this threat. But we must do so with an abiding confidence in the rule of law and due process. In checks and balances and accountability. For reasons that I will explain, the decisions that were made over the last 8 years established an ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism that was neither effective nor sustainable, a framework that failed. To rely on our legal traditions and time-tested institutions, and that failed to use our values as a compass. And that's why I took several steps upon taking office to better protect the American people. First, I banned the use of so-called enhanced interrogation techniques by the United States of America. I know some have argued that brutal methods like waterboarding were necessary to keep us safe. I could not disagree more. As Commander-in-Chief, I see the intelligence. I bear the responsibility for keeping this country safe. And I categorically reject the assertion that these are the most effective means of interrogation. What's more, they undermine the rule of law. They alienate us in the world. They serve as a recruitment tool for terrorists, and increase the will of our enemies to fight us. While decreasing the will of others to work with America. They risk the lives of our troops by making it less likely that others will surrender to them in battle. And more likely that Americans will be mistreated if they are captured. In short, they did not advance our war and counter-terrorism efforts, they undermined them. And that is why I ended them once and for all. Now, I should add, the arguments against these techniques did not originate from my administration. As Senator McCain once said, torture serves as a great propaganda tool for those who recruit people to fight against us. And even under President Bush, there was recognition among members of his own administration, including a Secretary of State. Other senior officials, and many in the military and intelligence community. That those who argued for these tactics were on the wrong side of the debate, and the wrong side of history. That's why we must leave these methods where they belong. In the past. They are not who we are, and they are not America. The second decision that I made was to order the closing of the prison camp at Guantanamo Bay. For over 7 years, we have detained hundreds of people at Guantanamo. During that time, the system of military commissions that were in place at Guantanamo succeeded in convicting a grand total of 3 suspected terrorists. Let me repeat that, 3 convictions in over 7 years. Instead of bringing terrorists to justice, efforts at prosecution met setback after setback. Cases lingered on, and in 2006 the Supreme Court invalidated the entire system. Meanwhile, over 525 detainees were released from Guantanamo under not my administration. Under the previous administration. Let me repeat that, 2/3 of the detainees were released. Before I took office and ordered the closure of Guantanamo. There is also no question that Guantanamo set back the moral. Authority that is America's strongest currency in the world. Instead of building a durable framework for the struggle against Al-Qaeda that drew upon our deeply held values and traditions. Our government was defending positions that undermine the rule of law. In fact, part of the rationale for establishing Guantanamo in the first place was the misplaced notion. That a prison there would be beyond the law, a proposition that the Supreme Court soundly rejected. Meanwhile, instead of serving as a tool to counter terrorism, Guantanamo became a symbol that helped Al-Qaeda recruit terrorists to its cause. Indeed, the existence of Guantanamo likely created more terrorists around the world than it ever detained. So the record is clear, rather than keeping us safer. The prison at Guantanamo has weakened American national security. It is a rallying cry for our enemies. It sets back the willingness of our allies to work with us. In fighting an enemy that operates in scores of countries. By any measure, the costs of keeping it open far exceed the complications involved in closing it. That's why I argued that it should be closed throughout my campaign. And that is why I ordered it closed within 1 year. The third decision that I made was to order a review of all pending cases at Guantanamo. I knew when I ordered Guantanamo closed that it would be difficult and complex. There are 240 people there who have now spent years in legal limbo. In dealing with this situation, we don't have the luxury of starting from scratch. We're cleaning up something that is, quite simply, a mess, a misguided experiment that has left in its wake. A flood of legal challenges that my administration is forced to deal with on a constant, almost daily basis. And it consumes the time of government officials whose time should be spent on better protecting our country. Indeed, the legal challenges that have sparked so much debate in recent weeks here. In Washington would be taking place whether or not I decided to close Guantanamo. For example, the court order to release 17 Uyghur detainees took place last fall. When George Bush was president. The Supreme Court that invalidated the system of prosecution at Guantanamo in (2006) was overwhelmingly appointed by Republican presidents, not wild-eyed liberals. In other words, the problem of what to do with Guantanamo detainees was not caused by my decision to close the facility. The problem exists because of the decision to open Guantanamo in the first place. Now let me be blunt. There are no neat or easy answers here. I wish there were. But I can tell you that the wrong Answer is to pretend like this problem will go away if we maintain an unsustainable status quo. As president, I refuse to allow this problem to fester. I refuse to pass it on to somebody else. It is my responsibility to solve the problem. Our security interests will not permit us to delay. Our courts won't allow it, and neither should our conscience. Now, over the last several weeks, we've seen a return of the politicization. Of these issues that have characterized the last several years. I'm an elected official, I understand these problems arouse passions and concerns. They should. We're confronting some of the most complicated questions that a democracy can face. But I have no interest in spending all of our time relitigating the policies of the last 8 years. I'll leave that to others. I want to solve these problems, and I want to solve them together as Americans. And we will be ill-served by some of the fear-mongering that emerges whenever we discuss this issue. Listening to the recent debate, I've heard words that, frankly, are calculated to scare people rather than educate them. Words that have more to do with politics than protecting our country. So I want to take this opportunity to lay out what we are doing. And how we intend to resolve these outstanding issues. I will explain how each action that we are taking will help build a framework. That protects both the American people and the values that we hold most dear. And I'll focus on two broad areas. First, issues relating to Guantanamo and our detention policy. But, second, I also want to discuss issues relating to security and transparency. Now, let me begin by disposing of one argument as plainly as I can. We are not going to release anyone if it would endanger our national security. Nor will we release detainees within the United States who endanger the American people. Where demanded by justice and national security, we will seek to transfer some detainees. To the same type of facilities in which we hold all manner of dangerous and violent. Criminals within our borders, namely, highly secure prisons that ensure the public safety. As we make these decisions, bear in mind the following phase: nobody has ever escaped from one of our federal supermax prisons, which hold hundreds of convicted terrorists. As Republican Lindsey Graham said, the idea that we cannot find a place to securely house 250 plus detainees within the United States is not rational. We are currently in the process of reviewing each of the detainee cases. At Guantanamo to determine the appropriate policy for dealing with them. And as we do so, we are acutely aware that under the last administration, detainees were released and, in some cases, returned to the battlefield. That's why we are doing away with the poorly planned haphazard approach that let those detainees go in the past. Instead, we are treating these cases with the care and attention that the law requires and that our security demands.